Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we are going to be learning how to face COVID, understanding and managing emotions during the coronavirus pandemic. This is presented by Northwestern University CAPS. We're both clinicians at CAPS. I'm Adam Hibma, and I'm a staff psychologist.
Hi, and I'm Lynn Gerstein. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Welcome everyone to Face COVID.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. So we have a couple of preliminary things to cover before we get started. First of all, this workshop is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for mental health care. If you're currently experiencing a mental health crisis, please contact us at CAPS 847-491-2151 or reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. The number is there. Or you can go to your local emergency room as well. And if you have any questions about what services CAPS is offering during this time, please feel free to reach out to us as well. You can find out how to reach out to us on our website. And so go to CAPS website. Also, a couple of just preliminary things. Please silence cell phones, silence notifications on your computer. We just encourage you to be as fully engaged in this as possible. And as part of that as well, it might be helpful to have a pen and paper available just to take some notes of things that you want to keep with you and remember after today's presentation. So we're briefly going to talk about the four things that we're going to cover today. And the objectives today are how we can learn to face COVID together. Lynn, do you mind just reading a little bit about what we're going to be covering today?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Face COVID is a two-part workshop, and today, as Adam was telling us, we're going to be focusing on the first acronym, FACE, um, focusing on what's in your control, acknowledging thoughts and feelings, coming back into your body, and engaging in what you're doing. If you're interested in the second part of the workshop, these workshops do not need to be done consecutively. We've just divided them up into two different workshops. And the COVID part is there on your screen, committed action, opening up, and living with your values and identifying resources and living in the pandemic and taking care of yourself. So today we're going to be focusing on the first part of that acronym. And it's designed to really help give you some skills that will help all of us to manage our experiences during this very uncertain and difficult time.
And now Lynn's going to share a little bit more with us about what it looks like to focus on what's in your control.
So we start with focusing on what's in your control, which is actually kind of counterintuitive when we think about it. If we have an experience that makes us feel out of control, Adam, what happens when you experience something that's beyond your control, that you didn't anticipate, and it's unpleasant?
Yeah, I think when I experience something out of my control, I start to feel anxious maybe. I start to get sweaty. I also might try to find things that I can control, and sometimes that works and sometimes that really doesn't.
Absolutely. Some of us can relate to that even physically. If you've been in the experience of an earthquake, which is an incredibly out of control experience, we look for something to hold on to, which actually doesn't make sense because everything around us is falling down. And we feel anxious by trying to get things under our control. It makes us ruminate. It makes us wonder what's going to happen. Or we do something that's kind of called time tripping. We worry about the past or we focus on the future, and that takes us out of our current experience. So while we're in this pandemic together, we can look at all of those things that are out of our control, what's happening in the world, what our government does. Sometimes whether or not we get sick is beyond our control. And the fact that you're not able to go to classes, the fact that we have to socially isolate and distance, all of these things are beyond our control. What is within your control when the world feels so out of control? And we've made a list for you here. We encourage you to think about those things that are within your own control on a daily basis. Those things like your routine, what you do every day when you get up in the morning, how much information you're actually taking in, how much exercise you're getting, what's important to you, practicing relaxation or those kinds of skills. By focusing on those things that are available to you and within your control, you'll be able to manage some of those feelings more effectively than focusing on things that you have no control over. Adam, do you want to share some examples that you've been noticing during this pandemic that you've been able to focus on within your control?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the how clean or unclean my apartment is something that I find is in my control, and I in a way enjoy being able to clean my apartment right now just because it is something that I'm like I can create order within this space. I might not have a lot of order I can create in the rest of the world, but this is a place where I can create some order. And so I think that's something that feels in my control versus what's out of my control is I just learned more things that were canceled in Chicago this summer. I live in Chicago, and a lot of the fun Chicago events for the summer are canceled. So I know that that's out of my control. I'm not going to be able to go to those events. And so then I start to think about, well, what can I do otherwise? Like there are still things that I can do, whether it's reaching out to friends, whether it's, you know, presuming that there will be some lifting of the restrictions, whether it's, going to a coffee shop. Even if I can't do that, I can go on my bike and I can bike around the city. And so I think thinking about the things that those are some of the things that I guess I can do in the midst of the things that I would have wanted to do but can't. Yeah.
I love
What
those
about you, Lynn?
examples.
I'm curious.
Yeah. I love those examples, and I want to, before I share some of my own, to think about a metaphor that we use. And you gave some really good examples of this metaphor of kind of finding a safe harbor in a storm. So if we look around the area, if we're in a storm like a ship, and we can focus on how rigorous the waves are and what's happening in the storm, or we can move into a safe harbor and what we call drop anchor. So if we're focusing on the fact that I don't want to name all of the things that were canceled for me last month and this month, I can start to ruminate about that and think about how unhappy I am. Or I can look at my home as a safe harbor and I can think about what can I do in this space and can I listen to some music even if I can't go to a concert myself. When we're focusing on those things outside of us, we're not dropping anchor and we may be swept away by those waves and feel actually worse. It isn't intuitive for us to pay attention to feelings that don't feel good. So we really encourage you to think about how can you manage to stay with those feelings and focus on where you have that control. What are the things and the behaviors that you can do? And maybe control some of the information about the storm that's happening around
Mm.
us because there's plenty of reminders about how much is happening that is not within our control.
Yeah, I've found that I've had to kind of disconnect from news a little bit at times. It feels a little flooding and
Absolutely.
overwhelming.
Absolutely. I used to find tremendous joy in reading the newspaper, and now I just go to the funnies page and do the crossword puzzle because that's something that's going to take my mind off of the news. So, really remembering that it isn't intuitive for us to sit with those difficult feelings, and we promise it will be helpful. It stops us from feeding that anxiety and making it actually worse. So that brings us into accepting our thoughts and feelings. So once we focus on what we have control over and what we don't, we're going to move into thinking about how can we accept our thoughts and feelings.
Actually, one more thought on this before we moved on, and I was thinking about how the severity of what's outside of our control can really impact our thoughts. Um, for some people, they may have lost jobs, they may have lost summer internships, their family may have lost jobs, and just how when family members un- may be sick, people may be sick who are watching this, and just how when the things that are outside of your control are more scary and have
Yeah,
bigger repercussions, how much harder it can be to focus on what's in your control in those situations.
absolutely. We don't mean to imply that this is going to feel good. You can't make the storm go away. We can't change the fact that maybe our parents or grandparents are ill and alone, and it feels lonely. It feels isolating to not be able to visit in the ways that we might want to, or to connect with friends in the way that we might want to. So allowing that sadness to have its own life rather than to feed it making by focusing on how awful it is or how scary it is. There's a difference between feeling the sadness, and I think we're going to shift into kind of moving out of that anxiety and worry and rumination into managing and sitting with some of those uncomfortable feelings. So again, I really appreciate that point that the harder And the more severe the feelings are or the situations, the more challenging it is for us as human beings to just sit with that.
Well, moving on to the next slide, accepting thoughts and feelings. So we can't magically eliminate our unwanted thoughts or feelings. I know so often people come to therapy and they think, I just don't want to feel this way anymore. I just don't want to think this thing anymore. And I know for me, Lynn, I've oftentimes wished that I had a magic wand that I could
Yeah,
just wave and rid people of their negative thoughts and their negative feelings and make them go
absolutely.
away for them.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I'm not a magician, and that's something that's my ability to just magically make people's unwanted thoughts and feelings go away as much as I wish I could. And it's a very natural longing that people have too. And sometimes trying to get rid of our thoughts and feelings is actually counterintuitive. So, for example, I want you to not think about a pink elephant. Whatever you do, push the idea of a pink elephant out of your mind, rid it from your thoughts. Don't imagine a pink elephant. Don't imagine what its trunk looks like. Don't even think at all about a pink elephant.
I can't
So,
get a pink elephant out of my head.
exactly, right? So it's very counterintuitive, but we try to push things away. We try to push these thoughts and feelings away from us. And by trying to push them away, we sometimes make them stronger. We sometimes actually feed these thoughts and feelings. So that's kind of a first understanding to this slide. Another thing is that during a crisis, feelings of fear and anxiety are inevitable and normal. There's nothing wrong with you if you're feeling anxious right now. There's nothing wrong if you're feeling stressed. I think most of us, all of us, are feeling some level of anxiety and stress right now. And there's actually something very connecting in that. There's something very universal in our experience right now that we're all trying to figure out how to deal with this. And we're all experiencing the uncertainty of the times. And knowing that, that can actually be very connecting. Like
Hmm.
I know when I talk to Lynn on the phone, I can say, "Hey Lynn, how are you doing with all the stuff that's going on right now?" And
Hmm.
when I ask that question, I know that you know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. I'm not the only one who's feeling isolated, lonely, tired of only being able to see my friends in little squares like this on the computer. And there's something very engaging about that. The fear and the anxiety that we feel are functional in other circumstances. I would be more worried about people who weren't feeling any anxiety or fear when things are difficult or out of control. They're kind of warning signs for us that we need to get up and act. The challenge is that when we're in an experience that's going to be here with us for a long time, that they're not serving us in that situation. And the more we focus on them, the bigger they get. So that's a hard one for me to wrap my mind around. I know when I encounter something that makes me uncomfortable, boy, I want to fight it. I put on my boxing gloves and I start knocking it down. And then I have to remind myself, all I'm doing is making it fight back with me. I'm not really helping that situation. So it's really important for us to be able to pay attention to what we're feeling and to not push it away and not fight with it.
Absolutely. And before we can accept our thoughts and feelings, we first kind of have to survey the land to see
Mm.
what is happening. And surveying the land as it relates to our thoughts and feelings is just acknowledging our thoughts and feelings. I think we sometimes really try to get away from those thoughts and feelings. And so, just what's coming up for you? What are those thoughts? What are those unwanted thoughts you're experiencing? What are those unwanted feelings? What are the sensations that you're experiencing in your body? Any urges, any memories that are coming up? And before you can accept something, you need to acknowledge that it's there. So just starting with kind of taking an assessment of what's going on. And of course, when you feel overwhelmed, it can sometimes be difficult to identify and acknowledge specific feelings. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that and what can be helpful for that. So this is a feelings wheel, and it has a bunch of different feelings that people experience, and just list them for us. And where I find this wheel helpful, and first of all, I hope that you all can see this, and maybe
Mm.
you can make your computers like full screen, or your zoom in on your phones, or hopefully you can see it. And if you can't, you can always Google feelings wheel, and there's a ton of them. the ones that I've seen are all really helpful. Um, but what can be helpful about looking at something like a feelings wheel is I liken it to if you've ever learned a new language. And when you're learning a new language, sometimes there's a difference between how many words you can understand and how many words you can actually produce back.
Mhm.
Lynn, have you ever experienced anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. I call it being the experience of being a 2-year-old, of knowing that what you want to say and not being able to produce the words. So you're actually able to understand the situation. And when you try to speak, it's like, how do I get these words? We actually can listen and comprehend faster than we can speak. And it makes it very challenging for us to listen to one another. And it also makes it really challenging for us to slow down enough to recognize what is this that we're feeling? How can I put a word to it? How can I understand it and connect it to my experience? It may seem simple, but in reality, sometimes I can't tell the difference between feeling lonely or feeling scared. Sometimes those feel similar to me in my body, and I have to think about what is actually happening before I can kind of tease that out. It's really important for us to slow down enough when we're having these experiences so that we can begin to attach a meaning to it or a label to it. And that will help us figure out what we can do. We come back to where we have control and where we don't have control. Sometimes being able to label what it is that we're feeling opens up the doors for us to create options on how to manage that. What I need when I'm
Yeah.
feeling afraid might be different than what I need when I'm feeling lonely.
What, and I'm hearing what you're saying about how it's helpful to identify the differences between those because they kind of give us an idea of what to do next. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I'm feeling lonely, that might be an indication that I need to reach out to someone for connection. Or maybe there are times where I just need to tolerate feeling lonely for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's something important for me
Absolutely.
to do and acknowledge that loneliness is part of the human condition as well.
Right.
Versus if I'm scared, maybe I can think more about, well, what's causing me to be scared right now and see if there's anything I can do about that, see if it's in my control, see if what I'm scared about is out of my control. And that kind of brings us back to the last slide about focusing on what's in
Absolutely.
your control.
Sometimes we try to talk ourselves out of our feelings when we're feeling something that we don't understand. Like, why should I feel this way? I shouldn't feel this way. And that is the same kind of thing that moves us away from feeling and recognizing what our experience is. So I know sometimes I might be feeling sad and I question it. Why am I feeling sad? I shouldn't be feeling sad. Whereas if I acknowledge, wow, I am feeling sad, then options and things can open up for me to be able to manage it. Maybe I need to talk to a friend about it. Maybe I need to cry. Maybe there's a reason that I'm feeling sad. So, slowing down, recognizing, identifying your feelings actually create opportunities for you to manage those feelings in a way that is less overwhelming and begins to feel a little bit more in control.
Absolutely. And we have one more analogy for you about feelings, and it relates to the attempts to push away those feelings. So maybe I notice I'm feeling lonely and I'm thinking, I shouldn't be feeling lonely. I have all these people in my life and blah, 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 blah. And I'm telling myself why I shouldn't be feeling lonely, like Lynn was saying, kind of fighting against those feelings. And we liken it to having like a beach ball in a swimming pool. And you have
Uh-huh.
this ball filled with air, and sometimes trying to get rid of our feelings is like trying to take that ball and dunk it underwater. And then what happens when we try to force this ball underwater?
You get hit in the face with the beach ball. It just slaps you right in the
Absolutely.
face.
It does. It's just going to pop right back up. We can't. And we're using a ton of energy to keep that
Right,
underwater because it's going to take so much energy to just kind of keep shoving that under. It's going to be an active fight. And
right.
we're going to get tired eventually. And what's going to happen when we get tired?
Yep, we let go and it comes back full force, and it hurts, actually. It
Right.
slaps you right in the face.
Absolutely. So instead of trying to fight against the ball and instead of trying to fight against our feelings, what we can do is we can just notice them. We can say, oh, look, there's that beach ball right in front of me, or oh, there's that feeling that I'm feeling. I don't necessarily want it to be in front of me. I don't necessarily want this right now, but it is.
Mm.
And so I can look at it. I can say, oh, hey, how you doing? Like it's just
And
chilling
it
there.
starts to sail away on its own sometimes if we leave it alone. We're not fueling that energy because it comes back with full force.
Absolutely. It starts to sail away. Sometimes we can even like use our energy to swim away then. Maybe we can say, oh, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends over in this part of the pool and I'm gonna let this just hang out over here. It might still be there, or it might, as Lynn was saying, just sail away over time. So that's just sharing a little bit more about why it can be counterintuitive to fight our feelings and those unwanted thoughts. So now Lynn's going to share a little bit about coming back into your body.
So when we're talking about that natural human instinct to move away from our feelings, we have to be aware that we have to be intentional about staying with our feelings. And one of the ways to do that is to come back into your body. Because our brains are so sophisticated, they'll pull us out of the moment. They'll pull us into the future and get us worrying about that, or they'll pull us back into the past and give us lots of regrets, or focus on things that we don't have any control over and fuel that anxiety. By coming back into our body, we can actually begin to slow that down and become aware and connect to our feelings. So what do we mean when we're talking about connecting to our body? We mean paying attention to your breath, breathing, pushing your feet hard into the floor, touching yourself and being aware. We call this sometimes grounding, just being grounded and present. We can, by coming back into our body, it moves us into the present moment. If I'm sitting here thinking about what I have to do after this workshop and all of the things I'm not going to get done, I've already left. I'm not in the present moment. Whereas if I can remember I'm sitting in this chair, I can feel my feet flat on the floor, I can see Adam on my screen, and I can pay attention. I can actually press my hands together. Anything at all that can bring me into my body is going to bring me into the present moment. Adam, do you have some thoughts about how you do this when you're feeling yourself being pulled out of the moment?
Yeah, I think sometimes I might just do some stretching. I think that can help
Mm-hmm.
me bring myself into the present moment. For me, biking is a very kind of grounding experience. I have to be very aware of the present moment when I'm biking because I'm biking in the streets of Chicago, so you kind of have to be
Absolutely.
aware of what you're doing.
Yes.
Um, Sometimes I might even do something like the dishes or something. I know I keep talking about cleaning, but I think sometimes I might even do something like the dishes and focus on like the warmth of the water and the feeling of the plate and kind of do something that's very kind of tactile that helps me to just experience my senses in the moment and come back into my body.
Yeah, I love those examples. And when I think about this myself, I think about when I'm walking to the train, when we're not sheltering in place. I ride the train, and one of the greatest joys in my life is taking that stroll and looking at the flowers and paying attention to what it feels like. And I know that if I'm worrying about what I've got on my desk and what I didn't do, I'm more likely to trip and fall. I'm not paying attention to what's happening. Whereas if I slow down and I think about the miracle of walking, that my feet are touching the ground and I'm moving forward, I can feel the wind, then I'm having a very different kind of experience. I'm going to have a very different kind of train ride. And actually, I'm going to have a different kind of day. So anything that you can do that brings you into your body is going to bring you into the present moment. I think we're going to be doing a guided meditation to give this as an example. Is that where we're headed next, Adam?
Yes, I think so. So as we do this, our cameras are going to disappear and we're going to put ourselves onto mute, but you'll be able to hear what the audio is for the guided meditation. It's about a 3-minute meditation. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play and we'll make sure that we're muted.
welcome back. We encourage you to think about, what did you notice during that activity? What sensations you were aware of? Feelings? Any thoughts? I know I became aware of how tense my body had been feeling as I did the exercise with you all. I'm always struck by the different places that tension lives in my body. And just being in the workshop with all of you, and Adam, we've done this workshop many times, and I'm comfortable and excited to be here, and was not aware of the tension in my jaw, my neck. And I think, how far away we come from that present moment by just the day-to-day living that we do.
Absolutely. I was thinking very similarly. I was like, wow, I did not realize all these places, like my jaw. I was like, wow, we're tense right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how even as we're doing this workshop, I can be experiencing that. And I think also an important thing whenever you're doing a meditation like this is that there are no right and wrongs. All there is your experience. So the point of this is just to notice whatever you're experiencing. Maybe during the meditation, your mind wandered at times.
Mm-hmm.
Yourself getting distracted, thinking about what's coming up in the future or regrets from the past. And when that happens, there is nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
We encourage you just to bring your thoughts back to the meditation if you continue to do meditations like this. It's not about right and wrong. It's not, oh, my jaw is tense and that is bad. It's just noticing whatever's happening for us. And it allows us to make choices. When I noticed my jaw was tense, I was able to relax it a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that was the choice I was only able to make once I knew it was tense. But I didn't know that until I slowed down enough to realize what was going on.
And I feel the same way, where I keep the tension usually is in my shoulders and in my neck. And it's not until I relax or slow down that I realize, whoa, there was a lot of tension. I was hunched over. I have a colleague that sometimes says my shoulders are up in my ears and I don't even know it because I'm walking around so tense. So this meditation is short. One of the things I love about it is that it's short. I find myself wanting to pay attention several times throughout a difficult day. I might do it before a workshop. I might do it before a difficult meeting that I might have. Sometimes I do it before I'm going to journal about one of the feelings that I usually fight with, so that I can actually pay attention to what's happening in my body and be more present for whatever that feeling is. So as Adam was saying, it's not right or wrong. Your mind's going to wander. There's times that I try to do a meditation and I'm tense for the whole time. And I notice it and I pay attention to it and I'm aware of it. So trying to do these in little bites has been really helpful for me, especially during these days that are so challenging without structure, without the same kinds of daily routines that I find soothing and comforting. So I might find doing several small meditations through the day is actually more helpful than trying to do something that's longer. And you'll find your own way of incorporating this into your experience.
Absolutely. So finally, we're going to end by talking about engaging in what we're doing. And so this is something where we want to talk about how anxious thoughts and ruminative worries pull us out of the present moment into unhelpful, future-oriented thinking. So an example that I think about is movies and watching a movie. And I'm hoping you can all visualize this with me, but back before like the digital world, movies were all on films, like reels of film. And they would plug it into a projector, and what you would see on the screen would just be a little frame with light shooting through it. And so the film would go through, it would get projected, and then it would get wound up into another wheel. And when I think about anxiety, I think about focusing on what's happening next in the movie. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen next? And thinking about what's going to happen 5 minutes in the future or an hour in the future. And when we do that, when we're focusing, if we're in a movie and focusing on what's going to happen next, we're not really able to enjoy the present moment. We're not able to really enjoy the frame that's in front of us. And all we really have, all any of us are really guaranteed, is the exact moment that we're in right now. And so sometimes anxiety or regret or depression and sadness is kind of this focus either on what has already happened and what's already been wound up in the reel, or what's going to happen and what hasn't been projected yet. And we really want to use this time to encourage everyone to remind themselves to focus on what is right in front of you in this exact moment. So bringing your attention back to where you are in the present moment and the environment that surrounds you, focusing on the activity that you're doing in the moment. Lynn, any thoughts or anything to add to this?
Yeah, I think about things that are easier for me to engage with, like eating delicious food. You know this about me, Adam. I'm a bit of a foodie. And so friends of mine will point that out, that there are times that I will slow down and really savor the texture or the feeling of something that I'm eating. And then I think of activities that are harder for me to be centered. I'm not like you. I hate to clean. So I practice, I have dishes in my sink all the time. And that's one of the places that I try to engage in what I'm doing and feel the water, to feel the soap, to really be able to pay attention to being in the moment. And even I can tolerate doing dishes when I'm engaging in that moment fully. Or other activities, simple things like taking a shower. I might be thinking, when am I going to get out of the shower? And what am I going to wear? And what kind of meeting do I have? And oh my God, I'm mad at that person. Instead of really experiencing what it feels like to have the warm water on my body and to feel the present moment, even brushing your teeth, I'm thinking, when am I going to get done with the teeth? Instead of being grateful for having all of my teeth and feeling how good it feels to be able to clean them. So engaging in what you're doing in the moment, even those day-to-day activities. And maybe, I know for me, it's helpful when I remember how good it feels to be eating something delicious. And maybe if I slow down like that, well, doing dishes will never be delicious, but it may not be the dreaded experience that I'm thinking. And the worry doesn't help us in any way. It doesn't make the sink clean. It doesn't do the dishes. So being in the moment and engaging will help us to be able to take care of those things that we need to.
Yes, I love those examples. And as you were talking, I was thinking about how hard this is in our society, how we are such a future-oriented society. And even, the audience for this, of course, Northwestern students, being a student is a very future-oriented endeavor.
Right.
Most people aren't students because they want to be students for the rest of their lives. Normally, people are students because they want to get a degree. And that's a very future-oriented approach. And I think even our society is built around always working toward that next thing rather than being present in the moment that we're in right now. And so, in a way, this is very counterintuitive. It's not how we have been raised for many of us. It's not how we've been raised to be. And so, really taking that time to slow down and to enjoy this moment that we're in, because again, this moment is all we have. All I have right now is this exact moment that I'm in.
Even our structures and our systems don't support us doing this. When you were talking about being a student, I was remembering always worrying about what was going to be on the test instead of what I was learning. And your analogy about learning a language, you know what? It didn't matter what was on the test. What mattered was, could I go to the grocery store and buy what I needed to buy? And I didn't really learn how to immerse myself in the experience of learning. I was goal oriented. And actually, the second part of this workshop, the COVID part, talks even more about values and how by being present with our feelings and in our bodies, it actually helps us connect to what's important to us and our values, and to move us into a place of being more engaged with those things in life that are really important to us.
Absolutely. So we're going to do one more activity before we end, and this is another grounding exercise to help put us back into the present moment. And this is called 5 4 3 2 1, and it's where you just really engage your senses to get yourself into the moment. So you start by looking around the room and noticing what you see. So I see a glass jar with granola inside of it. I see a brown lamp. I see a carpet with little hair-like strings at the end of it. Lynn, what are some things that you see?
I see a white coffee mug. I see the newspaper from today. I see a glass table in front of me. I see a chair with cushions.
Great. And so this is really just about noticing what's around you, engaging your senses. And one thing that we encourage people to, well, what we encourage people to focus on is just the facts of what's around them. We're really trying to be objective in this and just describe what we're seeing without putting any judgments or values to it. So I could say, I see um, a coffee table and I don't like it because I can see it's glass and I can see some smudges on it, you know, and when I start to get into the I don't like it, I'm putting
Hmm.
some judgments on my experience rather than just describing my experience and being present in the moment and accepting the moment and accepting what is around me.
It's a great
And
example because once we start to make those judgments, we've moved out of that experience. While you were doing that, I was looking over at the tea bag thinking, oh, I didn't clean up the tea bag and it's leaving a stain on my table. And I was already moving out of the experience of sitting here comfortably in my chair and just enjoying this particular moment.
absolutely, absolutely. So when you're doing this, you can also notice four things you can touch. And so I have a warm mug. I feel my warm mug. I feel cool metal. What's something you can feel, Lynn?
I can feel a soft cloth to clean my glasses. I can feel a soft cushion around my pen to hold while I write. I can feel the paper in the notepad that I'm using to write. I can feel the cool, hard surface of the table.
Absolutely. And so you're going through this and you're just noticing five things you see, four things you can touch, three things you can hear. And if you get really quiet, you might start to hear some things you weren't hearing before. I hear the hum of my refrigerator, and that's something I wasn't attuned to before. I live in an apartment building and I just heard a pipe as if someone flushed in another apartment.
I
I
can
just
hear the ticking of my clock, which I usually don't hear. I can hear the neighbor emptying the trash outside, is what it sounds like crashing.
and then things that you can smell. And so I have tea in front of me, so that makes it easier. I can just also smell the air around me. I can also smell detergent,
Yeah.
the smell of detergent on my clothes. There's always something around you. And then one thing that you can taste might be if there's something around you that you want to kind of indulge in and savor that experience, or I have tea with me again, or it might be just whatever tastes are kind of lingering in your mouth from whatever you last ate. Again, the purpose of this is just to really engage yourself in the present moment. So we're going to end with this ending quote. Lynn, do you want to share this with us?
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite quotes. It may be familiar to some of you. I know that it's used in many 12-step programs. I do believe it is anonymous, although that is used regularly in certain 12-step meetings. Um, Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So we hope that you've been with us as we've been doing this together to identify those things that you need to accept, those things that you don't have control over, and to accept those and to be with those experiences rather than in making them bigger by focusing on them. And it also takes courage to change those things that you can, to be able to sit with the feelings that might not be pleasant or might not be wanted, or to get out of bed in the morning when you know it's going to be a difficult day and that things are challenging and somewhat scary. It takes courage to change those and to create those routines and to be present with those feelings. And it takes a lot of wisdom to know what you have control over and what you don't. I find for me, it's a minute by minute, hour by hour challenge. I find myself being swept into trying to control things I can't and remembering how important it is. And we hope that the tools that we've given you today can actually help slow you down so that you can engage with your own wisdom and find your courage and make those changes that are possible for you during this very difficult and challenging time.
And we want to share with you a little bit about some additional workshops available at CAPS. We already discussed Face COVID, and I'll actually talk about that on another slide again, but there's also some other workshops. And we encourage you to go to the CAPS website for an updated listing of any of the workshops that we're offering, and you can find those just by searching for our website and learning more about the different offerings that we have. We touched on part one of Face COVID, and there's another part as well where it's more, as Lynn talked about committed action, identifying your values. And so we encourage you to attend that part as well, or to stream that part as well. And you can find more information about that on our website as well. So CAPS Clinical Services during COVID-19, we're providing support and connecting to local resources, and we're also providing some limited counseling services as well. So please review our website. I know I keep saying that, but please review our website for information on that as well. Lynn, do you want to talk about our on-call resources?
Absolutely. It's also important for you to remember that you can always reach a human being by calling that phone number, that 847-491-2151 phone number. And reaching a human being on the phone these days is not a small feat. When we are open, a human being will answer the phone and they will connect you with one of our staff. We each do a rotation so that someone is available. It might be me, it might be Adam, it might be one of the other staff. But if you're having a difficult time and you need to talk with one of us, please don't hesitate to reach out. They may schedule a phone call for you later that day, but somebody would be able to talk with you. After hours, and on weekends when we're closed, when you call that number, you're going to get a voicemail, but don't hang up. I know people are not used to listening to voicemails. They hang up, but please don't hang up. You will be prompted to a counselor on call. You do have to listen to that voicemail, but you will be prompted by hitting 0, I believe. It will give you directions. And there's always a counselor that's on call after hours. So if you need some support or need someone to talk with, don't hesitate to reach out to one of us. If it is a life-threatening emergency, of course, dial 911 or go to your local emergency room. Those are our services. And if you have, we have other resources.
Yeah, so we have additional resources as well. So feel free to go to any of these websites for more meditations, like the body scan that we did today. The Northwestern Breathe website has CAPS clinicians who've recorded different meditations, and so we encourage you to use Northwestern Breathe as well. But these are all sort of different mindfulness and meditation resources.
And you may have some that you know of as well. And I would encourage you to play around with them and to poke around, I call it, and practice some of the shorter meditations so that you can decide which ones feel comfortable or the ones that are more accessible for you. I think that's it.
So thank you for joining us today. We appreciated you sticking with us and being present with us.
Yes.
Finally, we have our references page. But
thanks everybody.
Thank you all for,
really grateful for your time and your attention, and hope that you're taking away something that will be useful for all of you. Bye. Thank you.